issues. Hey everyone, this is the editor group product and design weekly sync call, and I'll jump right in to move around my agenda items. The first one's super quick and came up right before the meeting. Enrique posted a comment on an issue based on feedback from the content editor, and I wanted to run it by you, Michael. This is related to keyboard shortcuts and code blocks. So the issue that came up was that when you're creating a code block in the content editor, the shortcut to exit the code block, if you were smart enough to figure it out, is command return, which also happens to submit the form on the page. So it's kind of a weird loop of unexpected behavior. There's two issues. One is that there's like conflicting keyboard shortcuts, and the second one is about education of keyboard shortcuts in general, and that being sort of a hidden functionality when you're working with code blocks. To solve the first problem of the conflicting keyboard shortcuts, I think Enrique proposed shift return because it's already alternative shortcut for tip tap. I feel like that's fine. And then we can probably close out the issue related to inadvertently submitting the form because you used the shortcut to exit a code block. And then we can focus on better in-app notifications and education around keyboard commands that help you navigate through the content editor, sort of as a separate issue. What do you think about that? I think you're muted.
I'm back. Okay, cool. So I have two thoughts about this because I think it's a good, I think it's a perfect MVC solution right now. I think respecting command return to submit a form is the right way to go, and like keeping it like that is cool by me. The part where we probably might iterate in the future is this shift return, because shift return is how you do enters in code blocks in the Slack editor, so in the like auto formatting world. So there could be a conflict there. So we'll revisit this probably in the future, but for the initial thing, I think this is fine to go ahead with that decision.
Cool. So I would say it's safe to close out, once we get that implemented, it's safe to close out the bug that's like specifically accidentally submitting the form. In general, the command return keyboard shortcut's also a little opaque, but if you do know that it's there, at least you won't accidentally trigger it. So that's great. I think I agree that we should work towards documenting. I see the issue you added in the agenda.
Yeah.
So yeah, making that really clear.
Yeah, so that was off the back of talking to Enrique about the toolbar editors and like keyboard shortcuts with them. So one of the things that we're looking to introduce for learnability is introducing keys for keyboard shortcuts. We kind of already do that in the current content, the current block, the editor tool, but we just want to double down on that. And because there are known keyboard shortcuts that are common, such as like Command V or Control V, whatever, like kind of pasting and all that stuff. But we also have these GitLab shortcuts. What we wanted to do right now was see if there is an overlap of potential shortcuts and ensure that we don't do that. And plus also probably have a separate list of keyboard shortcuts for other common tools so that we know what kind of where users could be coming in from their mental models of actions. Like this week, like I learned about Command K, and like it took me, I don't know how many years in this industry to finally figure out how to do that in all the tools. So that's kind of cool. Um, so things like that, that that will help with learnability with GitLab. We may have overlaps, but we'll cross that bridge when we need to. So yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. And Command K is a game changer. It's interesting to discover that. I didn't use it frequently until I started working here, and they introduced it in like comments and issues, and now it's a big part of my workflow. Shifting gears to talk about the web IDE a little bit. While we were trying to draft our Q3 OKRs, or proposed OKRs for Q3, I'm starting to think a little bit more broadly about what we've been talking about with the commit flow and improving that. And I think we could probably set maybe even like a 1-year goal for improving the MR to web ID workflow. And that could be inclusive of the act of committing, whether it's a new commit or that creates an MR or a commit that's going to an existing MR. But that also opens it up for us to explore things like revisiting the idea of having MR comments show up in the gutter of the web IDE, or even bring back the discussion about in-context editing and how that fits in with the web IDE. So I think this this theme makes it possible for us to identify the most effective and most ready to develop solutions, while we also explore some other opportunities and do some solution validation for some of the bigger challenges. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about that, and I'll schedule a think big session around this to just kind of get all those ideas out and see which ones are more exciting and more achievable, and maybe more valuable.
Yeah. I think there's an issue out there at the moment that I created a few weeks ago about the MR flow, but so is this talking about the MR flow specifically to the web IDE, or is this talking to it like across the board, across the different editors, or when you, MRs are on web IDEs, right?
Well, you can go to the single file editor, and that's where we could have a discussion about whether or not there's like an in-context editing and progressive path to open up things in the web IDE or something like that. But I think ultimately what I would probably be going for is driving usage of the web IDE by making the MR workflow more useful. So things like being able to see your comments alongside the code in the MRs, from the MRs in your web IDE. But that also comes with like what we were talking about with the commit flow, where there might be some paths in the web IDE that don't end up in a commit. So you might want to take some feedback from an MR and create a patch file or a comment that's effectively a patch file to be applied by somebody else. Or you might want to leave a comment and just leave it at that. That would be an interesting area to explore, I think, within the context of with the web IDE.
Yeah, I had this conversation with another designer about some of these ideas that we're exploring, such as creating patches or like creating like a MR comment. And this is like a interesting world where our world crosses over with like source code or code review very, very heavily. And what I don't understand is like the line between the worlds. So maybe as part of this, we kind of shape this. We figure out where things like whose responsibility is because like these ideas are awesome, and I just yeah yeah, I think in the spirit of GitLab with short toes and not worrying about stepping on each other's toes, I feel like it is like fine for us to like carry it through end to end. But yeah, it'd be good to know where, like, if it's because it starts in the web IDE, that's kind of like a rule potentially, or yeah, but yeah, if
Yeah, I
if
think
you create
that's a
an
good point.
issue for that, we'll probably can add some more information to that.
That's a good point, and making sure we stay informed of and in step with the strategies from code review and any other potential avenues of integration would be important. But I think things that happen in the web IDE are fair game for us to explore, and I am starting to feel like the potential for the source editor to drive the experience across multiple editing views in GitLab allows us to do things like implement comments or the ability to decorate lines in the gutter or call out attention to certain aspects of the code would benefit people in code review. It would benefit the workflow related to like security scanning. So you could highlight areas of vulnerabilities or risk in this that come out from a security scan. And wherever possible, enabling that workflow. And then if they don't implement it, I don't see why we couldn't do it for them because it does benefit everybody and it drives usage of the web ID at the end of the day. But yeah, I think we can think really big about the problem. We can identify areas that are already feasible. Like we don't need to wait for, there's no hard dependencies on other work to be finished or other teams to help us along, and then do some solution validation and see if we can verify that this is stuff that people want.
Cool. And the next point that I was going to add was with in the world of GitLab, there's the idea of this source code editor, there's the Git pod, and then web ID is in this like funny limbo. And one of the questions that comes up from time to time is like, what's the job to be done of the web ID, or what's its kind of use case in the whole scenario? If some engineers are more developing locally, what's the purpose of the web ID? Are we trying to explore this as we go, as in like, yeah, this is a good idea to have, here's a gateway for that, so let's try to use it, and then we can shape and use the web ID as we please to help find a use case? Or would it be better to figure out actually I kind of scratched my own idea because I was like, I'm not clear what the web ID's role is right now, nor has anyone really defined it clearly. But I could be wrong. I'm just going to check our direction page, but right now, that's the question I have, is like, I feel like doing this, we might be able to find the purpose for the web ID versus trying to do some kind of like research to find what it is. But what we're doing right now is taking some action, doing some stuff with it, and seeing what works, what sticks, and then maybe out of there we see a direction to double down on the web ID.
I'm right there with you. I agree, and I don't think you're wrong. It is in an in-between state. I think the hi. You want to say hi? Okay.
I want the Legos.
You want the Legos.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. We need to define that more clearly. And I think thinking harder about why this area excites me, I think by the process of figuring out this workflow, we could determine if the web ID really makes the most sense right now as like the MR editor, right? Like when you need to do work related to an MR, but you don't want to spin up your local environment. So if that helps us in the process of researching it, come to a conclusion there, then that would be great. Or it might lead us in a different direction. So actually, nobody's doing any real work here, and without any investment in like server-side compilation of code, then we're kind of dead in the water. That might be the outcome.
That sounds good, Eric. I think that it makes sense for me, and yeah, that's I'm okay with traveling down this path.
Cool. That was helpful, and it actually that helps frame where I'm coming from better for me, actually, in the process of talking that through. That hopefully this will help us find our place for the web ID, and if it doesn't, then it'll at least narrow the focus a little bit. You want to jump into your topics?
Yeah. So the one big one that I deal with, and you deal with too, Eric, on a daily basis is feedback from the navigation changes in 14.0. There are comments in there that make me want to revert everything and just take things back. But rather than taking a knee-jerk reaction to all the things, one of the issues that I created earlier this week was gathering data on discoverability. So one of the messages, one of the angles that we wanted to promote with consolidation in the top menu was the discovery of the dashboard pages. And what I want to validate through data is that, yes, we are actually tracking those, like we're actually seeing more visits to those pages from the top nav. And I realized that we don't have any events on the specific dashboard items. So I think that was something that I missed in checking. But we should try to get that in ASAP so that we can get some data on this. But as a proxy, I think we can get like page views. So if page views goes up, then we can probably see what's going on there. So that's one thing where I feel like we should let this simmer for a bit for like one milestone. But there's other things like the colors and stuff that's being addressed through various merge requests. The interaction patterns is a fun one. Yes, to help people, I think the hover pattern would help. It is not the like ideal keyboard scenario, as same as the search focus, but the search focus one is an interesting one because that was one where we thought it was cool to like continue because it was removed in 13.9, but then not everyone updates at the same time, so we get some delayed reactions, or like people didn't feedback, or we didn't see the feedback on the removal of the search thing. So yeah, I'm okay with bringing that back, which brings us to like, I want to spend some time on the solution validation on this idea of like the flyout menu with like the accordion menu combined. This potentially solves like keyboard navigation in a saner way, but also eliminates the issue with oh, should we have flyouts on menus or not? Because one of the things that we understood from data was people actually use the flyout menus when the menus expanded. So I'm like, okay, because it's a hover rather than a click, it's more simple potentially, but that's something that I want to tackle. So there's that epic that we have issues for iterations. My question is here is, how do you want me to mark things that are certain versus those that are waiting for like more information, data, research, versus those where I'm still exploring? Should we use the workflow labels in that scenario, or is there a way to like mark things with color or something like that?
Well, I don't know if there's color labels, but we could, I mean, we can use arbitrary labels if it would help you. I think the workflow labels would be fine if you just say ready for development. I mean, there's not much here that's going to need technical exploration. And I assume at this point, like, you know, your front-end skills are enough to validate that something is possible. And we have such talented front-end engineers anyway that I think we can execute on anything in a reasonable time frame. So if you're confident with the solution, marking it ready for development and putting a backlog label, I mean, backlog milestone on it would be enough to indicate to me that you're certain to move forward. You can ping me in the issue too when you make that change, and then I'll see it on my to-do list, and we can, take it from there.
Bye.
All right, cool. That's it. That sounds good.
But yeah, that works. And I hear the feedback too. I hope that you don't take it too hard. It's valid feedback. We want to address it all. We don't want to revert it. I still think it was a good direction to go in. We can take their feedback and make a couple small changes here and there and explore additional interaction patterns and things like that down the road. But it's still a change for the better. We're just not hearing the positive feedback from anybody in that issue. This is of the, I guess what we should look at is the adoption curve for 14.0, and we can probably suss out what percentage of people are actually feeling negatively impacted by the change. I was surprised at the vocal reaction to moving members by a couple people in there, because it seemed like a really benign change, but and one that we tested with pretty certain results that it wouldn't impact anybody.
Yeah. So with the members one, I think that one is not the change itself that bothers and people. It was more like the messaging, as in they were informed of it through the update. So maybe there's something that we could do in the future to talk about it like 2 milestones ahead and like be annoying, and then maybe I think there's something there where people were just shocked because they went from like 13.8 and then updated, and they're like, whoa, where's everything? And
absolutely, the shock factor is real there. We knew that was going to happen, and I should have, in retrospect, found a way to communicate that more broadly through in-app messages, although it doesn't help if you upgrade from 13.8 to 14.0 because you wouldn't have seen it. But blog posts, or I don't know, it's a real challenge because not everybody reads our blog, not everybody follows our release posts, not everybody watches our videos that we've been talking about for 5 months as we've been working through these things. Not everybody looks at the issues. So yeah, it's a tough challenge, but it's feedback to take forward. I'd love to see your next one, the wiki. I have time if you do.
Yep. Cool. So let me share my screen. Okay, cool. All right, so this is the wiki page that we know right now. And last week I was pinged on one of the issues where there was like some reordering of the page that was like explored a year ago. So this was kind of that restructure, and yeah, there's some elements in here that like I really like, kind of like having the commit thing at the bottom of the page, which was very similar to an exploration that I did maybe like a month ago. So the fact that like two people come up with like a similar pattern is always an interesting sign, especially when they don't know about each other and it's a year apart. The reason I explored this today is because that comment that you left for me was a week ago, but also Fran raised a question about having the delete button somewhere on the main page so you don't have to go to the edit page to delete it. So I was just exploring kind of this pattern and where this could live. So here we go. So I took the parts that I liked from the old exploration and combined it with where we're kind of at with our page right now. In the edit page, currently we have like the sidebar is like the parent page as well, and we have all this information here. And then this is like the version with the toolbar. And then if we kind of adopt this pattern to like have delete inside this triple dot, vertical triple dot, then if we take it to the reading kind of view, it kind of makes sense to go through and have it here to surface delete. So like this almost doubles down on the idea that we should do delete like that. I did a few more explorations. I'll just jump down to this one where I started thinking about, what's the purpose of this side menu while you're editing. So it feels like it's distracting to have a new page, new page. I was exploring like, why is it on here? I know in issues we have it like that, but it's really associated to this area. So moving new page potentially to somewhere on the right hand side when you're in editing mode, page settings pops up. This is where all your formatting and changing parent page or whatever you want to do with this page potentially could go here. This is like something that we explored very lightly in we actually implemented for the static site editor, so that's there. And I'm trying to now look at like unifying this top area and this edit page so that they kind of look the same. And where I got to here is this kind of view where we have breadcrumbs at the top of the page. I don't really know how useful they are when you basically have the breadcrumb on the right-hand side of the page. So that's something that we could explore in the future. Then this page becomes.
I'll just jump in there and add the breadcrumbs are useful because the sidebar doesn't show all pages for really large wikis. Like it's got some limitations on like how deep it'll display. So we would have to improve the sidebar before we drop the breadcrumbs, I think.
Cool. No dramas. That'll be just like an extra line across the reading and edit, so that's consistent. New page, like I said, really belongs here, but it could live in the top area if we really needed to have it in the short term. So this is all kind of iterative, but what I'm pretty happy about is like the alignment at the top menu. So there's always like a primary action to the page now. So it's new page is the main action, edit page is the secondary. Visually, it kind of works in that sense. This is like the read view. Jumping into edit view, this is what you would see. So this is using our kind of block editor. There's save changes, leaving edit. Pressing on this opens up like the settings menu. This takes you back to reading. Save changes then takes you to like a commit flow, which is to be determined, but this is like one way we could do this, because what we are looking at is almost taking wiki from the traditional view and making it more of like a content editing content tool. So where I am kind of happy with is like this top bar. So between the reading state and the editing state, it shares similarities. Any extra actions down here, like page history or delete page, would be tucked away in here. And yeah.
I really like this direction. I think it's a really thoughtful consolidation of the actions, and I like the repurposing of the sidebar when you're or actually removal of it in some of the concepts, but the sidebar not being visible makes a lot of sense. And I like the pattern that we kind of introduced in the static site editor with the settings and the drawer. So yeah, I think it's a nice evolution of the edit page. I would say the only challenge we're going to run into that I see right now is that the content editor in this editing view would only be valid for now for markdown pages. So if you switch the format, we'd still need to have a backup editing experience for like RDoc and others. It might just be the same view, but instead of the nice content editor, it's a form, and it's just like a larger input box. But yeah, that's gonna be a challenge. And then also we could talk about like we have already discussed how often are pages being changed format once they're created. Like, is that even a thing that we need to solve for? Should we prevent that from happening and only allow you to choose the format when you create the page? Or is there a different path to like changing the format that doesn't involve switching out the editor from under your feet if you choose the wrong one? Eventually, it'd be nice to have support in the content editor for RDoc and all those others, but that's pretty far down our list right now. But yeah, I think that's great. I want to move on this as fast as we can. Sorry, what's that?
Oh yeah, you changing the format. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. That makes sense to me. Your comments, and changing the format is the page type or page settings things that I tucked away.
Right.
Deeply. We already do some kind of pattern like that within GitLab when you have like templates, right? And then you switch the template and it says everything is gonna be wiped out if you do this, and then it gives you that action to say, okay, cool, just wipe everything, or like, okay, give me a second, let me like cut and paste everything somewhere else so that I can maintain stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think following that pattern makes a lot of sense. I think we would just want to make sure that the editor view, the edit view itself, doesn't need to get too restructured. It can support both types without having to wait for the content editor to support RDoc, for example, or whatever other formats we support. I always forget off the top of my head.
It's RDoc, ASCII doc, and something called
ASCII
org.
doc. Or yeah. Cool. I like this. I want to move on it as fast as we can. Honestly, I think this is the other half of our journey to having a complete content editor in the wiki that's like the default editing experience. The first half is getting full support from GitLab flavored Markdown, and the second half is making these changes, because once those both fall into place, I feel like this is a really killer editing experience, and we would make it the default one for wikis. You want this one?
Cool. I think, and the first step towards that is I can finally answer Fran's question whether we should use the triple dots or the icon button.
Yeah.
I think introducing the delete in the drop down feels strange, but like I think it'll teach us something about our ideas for the future.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's more versatile for other actions that might come up. And like I said in the issue, and you mentioned here, like moving the page history in there and things like that, lesser accessed actions makes sense. Cool. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up then. Let everybody that needs to continue with their day. Let you wrap up. And
Hello.
thank you. And yeah, thanks for staying a little long. Thanks for sharing the wiki stuff.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Say bye. Can you say bye?
No.
No. All right. See you later, everyone.
Bye.